The West Virginia Mountaineers have had quite the offseason, tons of changes. I want to get into it with a college football preview. I'm going to talk about the stars for this team, a few storylines, losses and additions to the roster, as well as an X Factor game and a record prediction at the end. Let's hop right into it. The stars on the offensive side of the football, Jaheim White, an extremely shifty running back, one of my favorites in the entire country. 800 yards, 7 touchdowns. I think he's going to get a ton more touches this season with some losses to the running back room in the transfer portal. And then to pair with him in the skill group, we've got Cam Vaughn, a wide receiver transfer from Jacksonville State. 800 yards, 5 touchdowns, kind of a gear-up wide receiver in his freshman season, if I do say so myself. 800 yards and 5 touchdowns is pretty impressive. So moving on, we've got Cam Barnes. He's a tight end. He's going to be on the field the majority of the season. 750 yards, 9 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. I think he's going to be an instant impact guy, a transfer from Northern Illinois. Moving on to the defensive side of the football, we've got a loaded secondary, in my opinion. Fred Perry, 10 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles. He is a backfield or a backside of the field specialist. He impacts the run game. He impacts the pass game. I think he's going to have to be the star for this West Virginia Mountaineers team because the front seven is not great. Now, speaking of the front seven, let's talk about their major addition here in the offseason. Jamori Robinson, an edge rusher from, I believe, UTSA. Let me make sure. Yep, that's right. UTSA, 10.5 sacks last season, 17 tackles for loss. A real power edge rusher, somebody that's going to be able to force his way into the backfield. He's going to be a guy that's got to have a major breakout season in the Big 12 for West Virginia to have some success. And then moving back to the secondary, we've got Michael Coates, 13 pass deflections, 4 interceptions last year. He is a zone hopper, somebody that can jump the football. He's a great predictor of that. Now, he does sometimes blow coverages, but I do think that every DB does. And this is going to be a guy that's going to step up in the secondary for West Virginia this upcoming season. Now let's talk about the main storyline from this offseason heading into this year. There was mixed reception for former alumni and former coach Rich Rodriguez making his return after a very ugly departure all the way back in 2007 when Rich Rod kind of played some games about whether or not he was going to go to the Michigan Wolverines. He ended up doing so. He kind of fell flat on his face there. He got fired. He moved on to Arizona, had a couple of successful seasons there, but ended up flaming out there. Then, kind of panders around the league, gets into a head coaching job at Jacksonville State where he's had major success. And now he's coming back 17 or 18 years later to the place that started it all, West Virginia. Now, like I said, mixed reception for him coming back. I think this is a spot where he can definitely succeed. The problem with him so far in his coaching career is that sometimes he flies a little too close to the sun, like leaving West Virginia a little earlier than he probably should to take the Michigan job. I don't fault him at all for doing that because, it's the Michigan job. Who wouldn't do that? But it was clear that he was not ready to perform on a Big Ten SEC type level. That's why I think he kind of failed. But now, after all of those years of experience, can he come back and do well in the Big 12? I absolutely think so. But it's going to take some time. And I don't know how patient these West Virginia Mountaineers fans are going to be. Now, let's talk about the losses and additions to this program in terms of roster building. The losses, there are some significant ones. CJ Donaldson, running back for this team, transfers to Ohio State. In the last 2 seasons, 1,500, I believe, rushing yards or maybe scrimmage yards, 22 touchdowns, though. Big red zone impact scorer. He's gone. Offensive line-wise, you got Wyatt Milam, goes on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was the full-time left tackle, and in my opinion, getting ready for last year's draft prep, he was one of the best in the country. Now, as well as he's leaving Thomas Ramai, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, offensive guard, 29-game starter for West Virginia, 1,000+ snaps last season. He transfers to Virginia Tech, a massive loss, in my opinion, in terms of continuity. And then last but certainly not least, Garrett Green, their quarterback, over the last 2 seasons, 6,000 total yards and 50 total touchdowns. gargantuan loss, in my opinion, in terms of offensive production. Now, he actually gets undrafted. He was an undrafted free agent, I believe, and goes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he's now a wide receiver. So very interesting changing career paths here for Garrett Green. But those are the losses. Tons of offensive production is gone. The additions, I've talked about guys like Cam Vaughn and Grayson Barnes, but I also want to mention somebody on the offensive line who's going to have to fill some of those holes that have been left. Walter Youngbear. Now, to me, a guy that is transferred in from Tulsa and only started 11 games last year. Well, only started 11 games, I believe, in his total career. Doesn't sound like somebody that you would be like, oh, wow, that's an impact transfer for my roster. But let me tell you this, Tulsa played up against Jacksonville State, and I can guarantee you Rich Rodriguez saw something in Walter Youngbear, and that's why he's been pulled into West Virginia, and he is a projected starter on this roster. You look at him, my God, is he like, he's meated up. He's got a massive frame. I think he's going to be a instant impact guy for this offensive line. So be on the lookout for him. And then on the defensive side, I've also talked about Jamori Robinson. Like I said, he's going to have a massive season for West Virginia's defense to have a step up from last year, which is going to be hard to do because this roster has major continuity issues with the new head coach, as do all new head coaches have with their programs in the NIL and transfer portal era. So moving into the last two storylines before I get into a record prediction and an X Factor game, pounding the rock. Rich Rodriguez teams, regardless of winning or losing, run the football relentlessly. Jacksonville State last year, I believe, was a top 5 rushing school in FBS. That is exactly what we're going to see here with West Virginia. Now, I'm interested to see how this will pan out in the Big 12, a very pass-happy conference. Can the run game keep pace with some of these passing offenses? In my opinion, probably not, but this is where it steps into what Rich Rodriguez how he makes teams special. So this is storyline number 2. There's a quarterback battle right now. And Rich Rodriguez quarterbacks almost always are dual threat guys. Take a look at last year. Tyler Huff, starting quarterback at Jacksonville State. Not only was he an effective passer, but he also ran the ball for over 1,300 yards and 14 touchdowns. That's a Rich Rod kind of guy, and that's exactly what I think is going to pan out in West Virginia. Now, currently, there's a quarterback battle. I don't believe a starter has been named. It's between Nico Marchiol, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. He's been a guy at West Virginia for a couple of seasons. And then a transfer in Jalen Henderson. He is going to be a guy that, in my opinion, probably pans out as the starter. If you watch his gameplay, he's more athletic. He has better acceleration. He's more of a dual threat. And that's, I believe, what Rich Rod is looking for. But let me just say this. You will see both quarterbacks throughout the season. I don't think either of these guys are starting caliber in a Big 12, aka Power 4 conference. I think Rich Rod is going to have to teeter between the two before he finds his quarterback that is going to become, quote unquote, his guy moving into the next season. So let's talk about the X Factor game. To me, it's the backyard brawl. It's the rivalry game for West Virginia heading into this season. Them and Pitt have got some bad blood. Last year's backyard brawl was a phenomenal game to watch. Now, Pitt ended up edging out West Virginia 38-34, but in my opinion, Pitt has become a much better team with continuity, and West Virginia is now in rebuild mode. However, this game is in West Virginia this year, and I think it's definitely a game that they could pull off an upset. It's a rivalry game, so you never know what's going to happen. I mean, just watch the last, I believe, 5 or 6 minutes of last year's game. Absolute chaos. So, with that being said, that is, in my opinion, a game that if Rich Rod were to win, he's got the support of the fan base. I mean, all you have to do is win an upset victory in a rivalry game, and the fan base rallies behind you. So now let's talk about the record predictions. To start the season, they get it off to an easy start. They have Robert Morris coming in, an FCS school. No question about it. That's a victory. And then this is a tougher game, I believe. Some action at Ohio. Is that a game that is an automatic W? Absolutely not. The Ohio Bobcats can come in and upset this West Virginia team with all of the continuity issues that they're facing, especially on the offensive side of the football. However, I am a Power 4 favorable guy. I am not a believer in the group of 5 teams upsetting Power 4 teams. That's not my forte. So I'm going to give West Virginia the victory there. But then some ugly losses to follow. Pitt in the backyard brawl. Like I said, continuity, talent-wise, they're better than West Virginia. I think this is going to be a close rivalry game, but I'm going to give the edge to Pitt here. At Kansas, Jalen Daniels, I have been a big believer of his over the last few seasons. He did not have a good year last year, but I think that they finally get it going under Lance Leipold. He is a guy that I also believe in. It's on the road. That's a tough spot for West Virginia. I will give Kansas the win there. Then Utah comes to town, and my goodness, have I been on the Utah hype train for, I think, 3 seasons in a row, and they have failed me the last 2 years. This is the year where things get back on track. Cam Rising is done. His time at Utah is over. The new era begins, but still a Kyle Whittingham team that has defensive prowess. This game is at home for West Virginia, but I think Utah is on a different planet in terms of talent composition and continuity, so I will give Utah the victory there. And then at BYU. Now, Jake Retzlaff is no longer the quarterback at BYU. They have a quarterback crisis currently. They will probably have that figured out, though, by week 6. I think that they can be competitive versus BYU, but I give them, the Cougars, a win there. So now, let's see, we're 2-4 heading into at UCF. Now, you want to talk about lack of continuity and just all-around chaos with a roster. UCF is one of those guys. They bring in, once again, a former coach like West Virginia. They bring in Scott Frost, who hired Alex Grinch as their defensive coordinator. Now, I'm not really a hater on coaches or players. I don't like to go after people, but Alex Grinch has been one of the worst defensive coordinators in college football over, I think, the last 2 or 3 seasons. The fact that he ended up immediately getting a job after being fired at USC, in my opinion, is astonishing. I think UCF is in major trouble. That is a victory for a Rich Rod squad that can go in and pound the rock versus UCF. But then hosting TCU, I think Josh Hoover, quite frankly, is one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Top 25 for sure. He's going to go and spin the ball versus West Virginia, even though I think their secondary is capable. I just don't think their front 7 is. So I'm going to give TCU the victory there. At Houston, that's another game where the roster isn't up to par with some of these other Big 12 teams. But later in the season, West Virginia is having to make all these trips out west to Kansas and BYU and then down south to UCF. I don't think that they're going to be ready to go for this Houston game. That's definitely a game that they could win, but I'm going to give them a loss for right now. Then home for Colorado. Now, a lot of people have been believing in the Colorado Buffs in their offseason. I'm a massive Deion fan, but I think having to travel from Colorado to West Virginia and having to play a very physical Rich Rodriguez team at home, I think that's a game that they can absolutely win. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give them the victory there. But then to close out the season at Arizona State, I know that they're not going to be the Big 12 contender, playoff contender that they were last year, in my opinion, but that's definitely a team that still has some dangerous weapons in Jordan Tyson and Sam Levitt. Kenny Dillingham's one of the best young offensive minds in college football, so I will give Arizona State the nod here, especially because it's on the road for West Virginia. And then last, but certainly not least, Texas Tech at home. If there's a buyer of Texas Tech, it's me. I have been on their hype train all offseason. They've paid basically for one of the best rosters in the Big 12, and I think a Big 12 championship berth will be on the line here. West Virginia could play spoiler, but I believe Texas Tech and the continuity that they have offensively is going to be the X factor there. That's why I give the Red Raiders a victory. So to close out my record prediction, I have West Virginia going 4-8. A disappointing start to the Rich Rodriguez era, but there are several games on this schedule that are very winnable. Pitt is extremely winnable. It's a rivalry game. I've said this over and over again in this video, but if they could pull off that win, go 5-7 or maybe 6-6, that's a massive win for the Rich Rodriguez staff and a great way to start his new tenure at West Virginia. So that's going to be it for this preview. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.